All right, so thanks guys for joining today. I'm Aaron Parker. I have with me Dan Morgan, the CTO at Teknologize, and Kevin Poole, the Director of IT at Archbright. Today we're going to talk about a hybrid to cloud identity migration challenge that Archbright was facing, why it mattered to the business, and really how we solved it with no data loss or user disruption. Let's start with Dan. Dan, you want to explain the challenge? What was going on?
Yeah, so we had a legacy Active Directory environment that had been joined to Azure Active Directory. Pretty standard business practice anymore. Kind of gives you that hybrid identity management platform without having to go all in on cloud identity management. Problem with that is once you've kind of gotten your feet wet in the cloud, you're ready to go all in, to go feet first. And unfortunately, by default, you can't do that. You can add hybrid Azure sync, but once you've hybrid synced a domain, you were stuck there. And that's kind of what we encountered here.
Hmm. Well, so why was it important to resolve it then? What was why was that actually impactful?
Yeah, so when you hybrid sync, an organization with Azure Active Directory, Entra ID, whatever you want to call it, when you hybrid sync them, your on-premises domain controller or wherever the VM that houses the domain data is, that's where the actual magic happens in Active Directory. That's where the passwords are. That's where all the credential management occurs. There's a password hash synchronization, so not the real password, but the kind of the representation of the password gets synced to the cloud. But it all happens on the local domain. When you decide you're going to decommission that local domain and create cloud only accounts, there was not a path at the time to do it. So if you needed to change passwords, you couldn't. You could forcibly change them as an IT administrator. We could change them in the cloud, but the end user couldn't change their passwords. And as Kevin can attest to, with a lot of users, that becomes problematic pretty fast. Not only from the compliance standpoint of knowing every single user's password, but from the standpoint of that's just a lot of users to have to reset passwords manually for.
Yeah, what was it like, Kevin? What was going on from your end with this?
So yeah, considering that we had basically three buckets for our environment. One was the full Azure Active Directory cloud. One was our original on-prem Active Directory environment, and we had a secondary domain as well set up as a well, at the time as an on-prem Active Directory environment. So we were syncing all three. And so basically, yeah, as Dan mentioned, there was no ability for end users to change their passwords, which, from a security standpoint is problematic, and from an operational standpoint is also challenging when you have quite a few users. At the time, I think we had over 100. So um,
Yeah,
trying to manage that and also being unsure if all of our passwords were compliant with our current password construction requirements was also a challenge. So, but more than that, I mean, just the whole rationale for doing this migration was that we no longer needed the original on-prem domain. We were ready to
good.
retire it. We were ready to completely shut down the on-prem environment, which at the time was being hosted at a local data center. So it was like, sort of not exactly on-prem, but for all intents and purposes, it was. It was costing us a lot of money, and all of the applications that previously had relied on that environment were no longer in use. We had retired all of them. So we were ready to get rid of that entire domain, and also set us up to, for the future to have one directory essentially, which we will be tackling shortly. And we wouldn't be able to do that without doing this initial kind of migration that Dan was able to accomplish.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, the operational I guess clunkiness of that seems a bit more self-evident from a
Mhm.
security standpoint, like you said, problematic. But Dan, give me an idea of what kind of risks are there actually out there, right? What does problematic mean from a security perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest risk is likely the passwords. That would organizationally, it doesn't matter the organization. If you make it difficult, if you make the barrier to entry too high, what's going to happen is we're going to go further and further without password rotations. We're going to reuse passwords. We've seen it organization after organization. If you make it too difficult to change a password, it's not going to get changed, or it's going to get reused, or whatever else. And so, from a security standpoint, that's probably the largest risk. But also, just not being able to effectively manage identities. What would end up happening is you'll have some cloud only identities. Those ones are fully manageable. So you have this inconsistency across your directory. But then you have your hybrid or your legacy hybrid identities. And those ones are not manageable at all or extremely unmanageable. And that's just a significant risk to the organization. Just that way, Kevin is bringing somebody on to because he's on vacation for 6 months or whatever, right? You have these circumstances where that's a legacy user, you have to do it this way and versus this way and your documentation just gets all out of whack, and honestly it's just not consistent or clean, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah. Yeah, it creates drag on the business as well as create risk and security. Well, so how did you solve it? What was the approach that you took for this?
Well, so I mean, we did it right in the beginning. We went to Microsoft, and we got pushed back from Microsoft a lot. Their answer was just rebuild it all. Um, like it's only 100 user identities, just rebuild it. And so I honestly considered that at first. I was like, I think we could rescript this, right? We could script this in, we could rebuild it all, and I walked through it with the team how we could do it, but it kind of came down to the Teams data. That's really where it put a wrench in the plan. Archbright uses Teams a lot across the organization, and Teams isn't as easy as it's not just disconnecting and reattaching a mailbox like it would be with Exchange. We would have to do a lot of nasty work in order
Mm.
to migrate all that Teams data, and it still wouldn't come back clean. So I decided that we had to come up with an out of the box plan. Anybody can come up with a plan to migrate data. We do it every day, but that's when I started testing what we could do with the Graph API. Being the Graph API being kind of Microsoft's Office 365 backend API access, and that's where it was pretty evident that I actually found I pulled up a handful of user identities and pretty quickly found, okay, there's a flag here. There's a cloud sync flag, and users that are created only in the cloud don't have it. Users that are created on the on-prem environment do have it. And it just became a matter of forcing that flag off for the entire organization, which immediately allows you to wipe that flag out, and everybody becomes an isolated cloud-only account. We created a test script. I spun up an entire Azure or an entire ADDS, Active Directory Domain Services, right? Legacy Active Directory in Azure environment. I paid for more Microsoft licenses. I created a brand new test tenant, and we ran through some test scripts. And it became evident pretty quickly that that's the solve. There's a write up. I don't remember the exact commandlets and script that I wrote, but that was effectively the solve. Being able to set that flag with the Graph API within about 2 to 3 minutes, it was able to make everybody cloud only, and now we have consistency across our directory.
Well, you said that Microsoft told you to rebuild everything, and then this was out of the box thinking or a creative solution. I guess give me an idea of what that means. Why didn't Microsoft tell you to do this in the first place?
I think they were just saving it for themselves. About 3 months or 2 3 months after we did this, Microsoft published an article that kind of details a very similar approach using the Graph API to solve this problem.
Hmm.
So yeah, I to be honest, it's one of those things where the Graph API is a really scary place. If you're in there and don't know what you're doing, you obviously can make some very catastrophic changes to your organization. And so they're not necessarily going to recommend that. But it is a tool. And just like any tool, you can cut your finger off with a saw if you don't know what you're doing. But it's also the most efficient way to cut a piece of lumber, just the
Yeah.
same. So it's a tool. When used inappropriately, it's very bad. When used appropriately, it can be pretty good.
Yeah. Well, so pretty good. Kevin, give me an idea from your perspective over Archbright. What was the experience like? Were you notice anything off, or give me an idea about that?
No, actually, there was really no impact to us. It was completely transparent. So at least I can't recall any. Um, but most importantly, it really, I mean, the other option would have been, I suppose, to recreate every account in Azure exclusively, and that would have been quite an effort and very disruptive, obviously.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think that from our standpoint, it was an amazing solution, and really made this whole migration much easier, at least from that perspective. Of course, we had a lot of other issues to get through, but this was a
Hmm.
huge win as far as reducing the cost and the complexity and the disruption.
Yeah, I love it. It's good to hear.
Well,
Well,
and
so
then obviously getting
yeah,
rid of the legacy environment of the data center allows us to save money, which is,
Yeah, yeah,
nobody
yeah,
usually complains about that.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's thousands of dollars a month, so yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
yeah. Well, it was about a year ago too, right? So that's still the case then, right? No,
Oh
no
yeah,
issues, nothing
yeah,
since.
yep, it's all gone.
Oh, that's perfect. I mean, that's the kind of solutions we want, right? It saves money. It's creative. It's a little bit of ingenuity with a lot of technical background. Creates a solution that prior to didn't exist, and now saves both money and it creates for a good user experience. So, any other thoughts, guys? Anything to add to all this?
No, but except that, just as I said earlier, I mean, it does set us up for future cost savings and success, because we are on the verge of basically decommissioning our other on-prem
Yeah.
domain, legacy domain. So that is coming up shortly. So it'll be very easy. We really only have one machine to migrate to Azure AD, whatever the term is these days for that product.
Mhm.
Um, so that's going to be super simple, and a huge cost savings as well compared to what it could have been.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. That was good. Really appreciate the time and the background, and yeah, look forward to continuing this on, Kevin, with decommissioning that last domain too.
Yep. Looking forward to it. Thank you.